Okay, it actually says we're recording today, so that's an improvement on last time. All right, so we're going to do chapter 2 today. I don't know if we're going to be able to cover the whole thing because there's a lot of information in here. But we're going to talk about numerically summarizing data. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 different terms. I'm running out of disk space. That's weird. Oh man, I gotta. Hopefully that's not going to be a problem. All right, so we're going to talk about the mean, the median, and the mode. Okay? All right, so these are 3 terms we're going to talk about. So the first thing, the mean, is what you commonly think as, here, I'll put average. Okay? And basically you add them up, up, and divide by the number. Okay? You've probably done that since elementary school. I don't want to call it average, I want to call it the mean, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay? The median is what I refer to as the middle value. The formula we use is n plus 1 divided by 2. I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. And then we want to do the mode, which is the most common value. Okay? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open up Excel. You guys can open it up if you want. And all right, Excel. I need to give myself a thing here. Okay, so this is based on a true story. The numbers are fake, but it's based on a true story. And let's say that University of North Carolina wants to find the average, and I'm going to put that in quotes, average starting salary for geography majors. Okay? So we've got graduate 1. Now I got to show you because I think this is so cool. Watch what happens. Okay, I've got my white cross here. When I put it right on this corner, it turned into a black cross like that. And I'm going to drag that down, and look, it counts for me. Isn't that cool? It's cool except for when you don't want that to happen, but I want it to happen. All right. So that will do the salary. Okay. The first graduate makes $20,000 a year. The second one makes $20,000 a year. The third one makes $25,000 a year. The fourth one makes $35,000 a year. And the fifth one is a very famous person that you may have heard of. He makes $3 million a year. You know who that is? Who's a famous graduate of the University of North Carolina? He did not make his money in geography, though. Michael Jordan, very good. Okay, did you know that Michael Jordan was a geography major? Who knew? Okay, so in the past, when I said, what's the average, what did you do? I'm going to pick on, I can't remember. I want to say Connor, but I don't think that's right. What's your name? Brock. Brock, how would you find the average normally? we're going to call the mean, right? You're going to add them up. Okay, so let me show you a really cool thing here. Do you see this little button right here that looks like an E? Okay. Here, let me stop sharing for just a minute because I want to show you something here on the board. Okay. So this Greek letter, it looks like this actually, is the Greek letter sigma. And this Greek letter is also the letter sigma. Okay? They're the same letter. This is capital sigma, this is lowercase sigma, this is the Greek letter S. It looks like an E to us though. Okay? And whenever you see that, that usually means sum. And whenever you see this, this usually means standard deviation, which we may have time to talk about today. Hopefully, we'll see. Okay, we're going to cover a lot of stuff. All right, so even Bill Gates knows that. And so, if you want to click on this auto sum button, what it'll do is it'll guess and it'll say, is that what you wanted to add up? Is that what we wanted to add up, Brock? Yeah, it was. It's got a extra blank in there, but I don't care about the blank, right? Well, so yeah, we can edit this, and then you said divide by 5, right? Okay. So the quote unquote average salary is $620,000 a year. Okay. If that was true, how many of you would change your major to geography today? Yeah, I would too, right? Now, the question is, do you think that that's what we would call the mean, right? Now, actually, I will mention something else here. Brock, you said something about average. What? Say that again. You wanted me to calculate the average a different way. Well, if you hit the arrow next to the auto sum button, it'll do average. Oh. Okay, so then we can take the average of all those, right? Okay, so even Bill Gates knows that, but I don't want to call that the average. But you can use it. You can use that formula. That's fine. Okay? And in fact, that one's probably better. Look at even put a comma in there instead of the way I did it. Okay? Now, that's what we would call the mean. But what do you notice about Michael Jordan's salary? It's a lot more, right? It's probably an outlier. Now, we haven't talked about outliers, but we're going to talk about outliers today, okay? I want to ignore that for now, but certainly one of the problems with the mean is it has a problem with outliers, and clearly Michael Jordan is an outlier, okay? All right, now let's talk about the median, okay? Now, the median does require you to sort your data. Okay. Now, luckily, my data was already sorted. Okay. How many graduates are there, Olivia? 5 graduates. Okay. So the formula I gave you was n plus 1 divided by 2. So if I take 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So if I simply count in order 1, 2, 3, that value there becomes the median, which is $25,000. Okay, does that make sense? Now, let me ask you a question. When you compare 620,000 with 25,000, and if I ask you what is the average salary, which of those two values do you think would be a better representation of the true quote-unquote average salary? The median would definitely be better, right? Okay? Now, one of the nice things about the median is it's resistant to outliers. Okay? Now, let's talk about the mode. Okay? So, what is the mode? You do not know? It's written on the board still. What does it say there? The most common value. What is the most common value there in that list? 20,000. So you could make a case that 20,000 is a better representation of the average, because 40% of graduates make 20,000, right? Okay. Now, here's what I will say. Usually the mode is just something we show you in this chapter, and then we're never going to talk about it again. The median and the mean are much better values, and we're going to talk about those a lot in statistics. Okay. All right. So now let me add another graduate in here. Okay. This is going to be graduate 6. Okay. And graduate 6, we're going to say, is $35,000. Okay, well, that's going to mess up most of my values. Now, if we use Brock's average command, that actually works better, because now it's only $500,000, right? I mean, this is really the true mean. In fact, I'm going to erase this one. Or I could simply, if I wanted to edit it, divide that by 6. And now it matches. Okay, but this is probably the better one. We'll get rid of this one. Okay. All right. So I'd still, if I could make $500,000 in geography, I'd change my major today. Wouldn't you? If only that were true. We still have our outlier. All right. However, we've got a problem with the mean, or excuse me, with the median. Okay. We've got 6 graduates. 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. I don't know about you, but I can't count to 3.5. Okay, so here's what you do in this case. Okay, I'm going to highlight this in yellow. We're going to take the 3rd and the 4th values here, and we're going to take the mean of those 2 values. So, I'm trying to remember your name, JC. JC and Casey. All right. JC, what's the mean of those 2 values? I bet you can do that in your head. What's the middle? Yeah, can't you? What's the middle of 20? Yeah, see, I knew you could. You're looking at me like you can't do that. I knew you could. So 30,000, okay? Now, in this case, nobody actually makes $30,000, but that's okay. It's the middle value. Half of the people make less than $30,000. Half the people make more than $30,000, okay? So there's a slightly different thing that you do when you have an even versus an odd number. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, now let's talk about the mode. What is the mode? What's the most common value now? Is it Delia? Dela. Dela, what do you think the mode is? There's 2. Actually, that's a very astute observation. There are 2 modes. The first mode is still $20,000. The second mode is what? $35,000. Okay, so in this case, we have 2 modes. Okay? Now, just for fun, let me get rid of this one. And let me get rid of this one for a minute. What's the mode now? There is no mode. Okay? So, let me just mention this again. You can have no mode, you can have 1 mode, you can have more than 1 mode. Okay? So that's another reason why people don't use the mode. Now, however, having said that, let me stop sharing for a moment. Do you remember when we were talking about histograms last time in class? What was this called? Bimodal. Do you know why it's called bimodal now? Because you've got 2 modes, right? That's bimodal. Okay? So typically you'd say the peak of those would be, that's why we call that bimodal. Okay? So you could have trimodal, you could have multimodal, anyway. So that's that. All right. So does that make sense so far? Okay. So that's not too bad. That's like, I lacked out like 3 sections already, just like that. All right, so now what I'd like to talk about is what we're going to call a 5-number summary. Okay? Now this kind of starts to answer Kristen's question at the beginning of the class. She wanted to talk about variability, and so we're going to start talking a little bit more about variability. Okay, so a 5-number summary consists of 5 numbers: the minimum, the maximum, the median, what we're going to call Q1, which is quartile 1, and Q3, which is quartile 3. Okay? You can think of this as the 25th percentile, and you can think of this as the 70th percentile. You can also think of the median as the 50th percentile. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so let's go back to our Michael Jordan set here. Oh, actually, before we do that, we'll do that in just a minute. So that's your 5-number summary. Now, one of the things I ask you is please list in ascending order. Okay? So if you do that, please try to list them in order. Another thing that I want to talk about is the IQR, which stands for interquartile range. And since we mentioned, we can still see that. Since we mentioned outliers, let's give a definition of an outlier. In order to find the outlier, you need to find the upper fence and the lower fence. Okay? The upper fence consists of Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, and the lower fence consists of Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. Does that make sense? So outliers are values beyond the fences. Okay? And in a moment, I'll kind of explain to you where that 1.5 comes from. You might be wondering, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Okay? So let's go back to our original data set. Let me share my screen. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. Let's use the original data set here. So this is original. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this graduate here. We don't want them in there. Okay. Now, it's pretty easy to figure out your 5-number summary when you only have 5 values, right? Okay. Let's pick on Eddie, because I remember Eddie's name. Can you tell me what your 5-number summary is?
6.
I should probably give you a better one. What's the minimum value?
The minimum value would be
20,000. What's the maximum value?
3 million.
3 million. What's your median?
Median would be
25,000. What's your first? Okay, so one thing to think about, I didn't really tell you. You could think of quartile 1 as the median of the top half. So what would be the median of the top half of your data set? 20,000. Now I'm not going to give you, so this is quartile 1. What's the quartile 3?
35.
I'm not going to give you data sets with only 5. But one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to prove whether or not Michael Jordan was an outlier in our original data set. Okay? Now it's kind of clear that he is, and this is a little bit of a silly exercise, but I want to go through the through it anyway, because it's super easy. And then we'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do a little short activity, and we'll do a better activity. Okay. So in this case, what is the interquartile range? And I'm going to pick on, what's your name? Catherine. Can you tell me what the interquartile range is in this case? Remember what interquartile range was? Oh, I didn't define that, did I? Okay, sorry. Here, I'll write it on the board, but I'll write it on here. Q3 minus Q1. Okay. Q3 minus Q1. Okay, so what would be Q3 minus Q1 in this case? 15,000. So 35,000 minus 20,000 equals 15,000. That's your IQR. Okay. Now, if I'm looking for outliers, one of the things that I'm going to sell, did you notice, if I go back to my thing here, both of my formulas have a 1.5 in them? I'll explain that in just a minute, but let's just multiply both of these by 1.5. So 1.5, and then the asterisk is how you multiply in here, times the IQR, okay? That's shift 8, as you're looking at that. So if I take 15,000, I want to multiply that by 1.5, okay? And that gives me 22,500, okay? Now, as we look here, my lower fence, the definition was Q1 minus 1.5 times my IQR, and my upper fence was Q3 plus 1.5 times my IQR. Okay, so my lower and my upper. Okay, so now that I've got this in here, okay, you're going to take your Q1, which in this case is $20,000. We're going to subtract 1.5 times the interquartile range. That's why I multiplied it by there first, okay? So in order to find a salary that's an outlier on the lower side, you'd have to find a salary of negative $2,500. Now, unless you're a slave, I don't know anybody that makes you pay to work for them. Okay? All right. Now, on the upper side, we're going to take Q3, which is $35,000. We're going to add 1.5 times the interquartile range, which means 57,000. So anybody who makes more than $57,500 is an outlier. Are there any outliers? Clearly there are. Who is the outlier? Grad 5, which is Michael Jordan, right? Okay. So this is now an outlier. It's in the maximum, but it's the outlier. Okay. Now, one of the things that we can do, and I'm going to draw this on the board first. Stop sharing here. Okay. Is we can create what's called a box and a whisker diagram. Okay? So the box and whisker diagram is going to consist of the 5-number summary, but let's decide on the fences. Okay? So in this case, so here's what you can do. Okay? I'm going to draw it this way: minimum Q1, median Q3, and the maximum. Okay? So here's how they basically work. So what you're going to do is you're going to draw a box on the inner quartile range. Okay? And you're going to put a median in the middle. And then you're going to draw whiskers to the minimum, and I'll put or lower fence. And you'll draw a whisker to the maximum or the upper fence. Okay? And then if you have outliers, you can put a little star here. That would be an outlier. And this would be an outlier on the top side. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So that's basically what a stem and whisker plot is. Now, of course, you're going to need to actually put values in here. Okay. Now, the question is, do you use the minimum or do you use the lower fence? And do you use the maximum or the upper fence? Okay. And it all depends on whether you have outliers. If there are no outliers, you're going to use the minimum or the maximum. If there are outliers, you're going to use whichever fence there is. Okay. So I used to, in the past, Excel did not allow you to create a box to whisker diagram, but now they do. And for the first time ever, I'm not going to make you draw these. Well, I will make you draw them manually on a piece of paper, but for the first time ever, I'm going to allow you to use the Excel function, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, I had a question.
So if like in like the case that we just did, would you use the minimum and then the upper fence, or would you like match them to the
Yeah,
lower?
so in our case, in fact, that's a good question. Let's go to our case here. I hate this thing sometimes. Okay. So we know that Michael Jordan is an outlier. Here, I'll put him in red there. Okay. Would I use the maximum or the upper fence on that case? What do you guys think? I would use the upper fence. Do I have any lower outliers? No. So do I use the lower fence or do I use the minimum? I will use the minimum in that case. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and do this. Highlight your data just like this. Okay. If you go over here to insert, I don't like doing this. We're going to have to do it anyway. But we're going to go to recommended charts. Down here, oh, they don't have it. You're going to have to go to all charts. Okay. You've got a thing called, now, by the way, I know there's a histogram maker. I don't want you to use it on the test, but you can use the box and whisker. Oh, that's pretty funny. You know what? Something's messed up here. Let's talk about person. Let me try this again. Insert recommended charts, all charts. I think it doesn't work when you, that's your histogram. Oh, it does work. No, it didn't work. Ah, that's interesting. It did not work properly when you only have 5 data sets. Okay. That's funny. That's actually, well, let me see here. This is actually going to be wrong. You're not going to ever have a 5-number summary that small. Here's what I would like to do. I would like you, we're going to take about 30 seconds, okay? And here's what I'd like you to do. Find your pulse, okay? And I want you to count it for 30 seconds, and then we're going to record the data. I'll tell you when to start here in just a second. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find the 5-number summary, and all that stuff, and the mean, and then we're going to make a box and whisker plot out of it, because you're not going to do this on just 5 data points. So get ready here, find your pulse, and I'll tell you when to start counting. And we're going to do this for about 30 seconds. So if you found your pulse, we're going to start in just 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, stop. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start collecting data here. Now, by the way, let me just mention this. Okay, so this is 5-number summary, and then this is going to be pulse. I will make a copy of this and we'll post it up on the website so you can do this. So we're going to go around the room and we're going to ask you what's your pulse rate. How did I already forget your name? It's Brock. What's your pulse? 32 and 43 and 30, 30, 28, 29, 39, 35, 33, 34, 30 what? 38, 34, 34, 38. Kristen? 32. Okay. So let's find the mean, median, the mode, and the 5-number summary. And we're going to look for outliers. Okay? All right. So tell me your name in the back. Casey. So help me find the mean.
Divided by 15.
Okay, or do you remember Brock's command? Equals, it's the A word I didn't want you to use.
Use a sigma sign for that.
You could, but there's an easier way. What's the A word? Average. First, Bill Gates when you do that, okay? Okay, so we're going to highlight all of our data, either with our mouse or with our keyboard. So the average pulse in here is 33.9333, okay? What's the median? How do I find that? Oh, I can't remember your name in the back row.
Carson.
Carson. How do you find the median? No, you don't add them up.
The number of them plus 1 plus 2.
Okay, but is my data sorted? Do you know how to sort your data? No? Okay, so here's what you do. Put your mouse, you can highlight your data. That's probably the best thing to do. So we're going to highlight our data. We're going to go to data, and then we're going to sort A to Z. Okay? So that was easy. Okay? Did you see that? All right, so the median, so you said we've got 15 data points. Okay? 15 plus 1 is 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay, so we're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that number there became our median, so our median is 34. So our mean and our median are very close to each other, aren't they? Okay. What is the mode? Mr. Red Sox, what's your name? What is it?
Keaton.
Keaton. Keaton, what's the mode?
34.
34. We've got 3 34s, right? That's the only one we've got. Oh, wow, that's funny. So the mode is also 34. Wow. I did not expect that. Okay. All right. So now, tell me your name in the gray. Yep.
Jordan.
Jordan. What are the numbers for the 5-number summary?
First we need the minimum.
Minimum, which is 28. If you want to press equals, and then you can click on the 28, and then it puts it there. The next number is?
Your Q1.
Q1, we'll ignore that for now. The next number is? Median. The next number? Q3, and the max, you probably know what the max is. 43. Okay, so you probably know what the median is. 34. Okay. Now, here's the tricky part. Okay? Now, the question is, when you're finding your Q1 and your Q3, Kristen, we had this argument last semester in your teaching class. Did we want to include the median or not? What did we decide? Yeah, I like that rule better. That's the rule I always teach it. Okay, so the question is, do I include the median or not? Now, if there's no hard and fast rule on this. There's a lot of different ways to do this. We're going to do this the manual way, as I've been teaching you, and then I'm going to show you the computer way, and the computer's probably going to give me a different answer. It may or may not, I don't know. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Okay? So here's what I'm going to tell you. The question is, do I include the median? And I want my number to be odd. So if I do not include the median, I've got 7, right? Now, notice on here, I included the median because I wanted it to be odd. Okay, so sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. You want this number to be odd. So if I do not include the median, now it's odd. 7 plus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I'm going to count down to the fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. That number there becomes my quartile 1. Okay, in this case, it's going to be 30. Okay, my quartile 3, I'm going to not include the median again. Okay, I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4. That number equals 38. Okay, so on the quiz on Thursday, you're going to have to do this with by hand. But I also, on the test, I'm going to have you do this by the computer. Now, if you were writing software and you wanted to find the minimum of a data set, what command would you pick? What would you call your command? Equals min. Very good, okay? Min, put a parenthesis on there, and now you can highlight your data. Now it's already sorted, but you didn't, with this command, you wouldn't have to sort it, okay? So the minimum is 28. If you were coming up with a command for the maximum, what would you use? Equals max. Use a parenthesis, highlight your data. That's also 43. If you were coming up with a command for the median, what would you call it? Equals median. Olivia's on fire today. Okay, equals median. Let's see if it gets the same value of 34 that we got. And it did. Oh, I forgot to highlight that one here. If you were coming up with a command to do the quartile, what would you call it? Equals quartile. Now, here's the tricky thing. You have a couple of different ones, okay? Do you want to include the median? Do you want to exclude the median? This is the old-fashioned one. I think it includes the median. I can't remember. Okay? I like the bottom one, but you could use either one of them. So the fact of the matter is, okay, so now you have to be a little tricky. So if you double-click on that, it tells you what you want to type in. It says array. Array means your data set. Okay? So here's what you can do. Highlight your data set. Now, you don't have to press F4, but I'm going to press F4. What does F4 do for me? You guys remember from last class? This is an Excel thing. Who remembers? Nobody remembers? Yes.
Is it formatting the cells?
It's not formatting the cells. What it does is it puts those dollar signs in there and it says, I don't want those cells to change when you copy this formula, because we're going to copy them just a minute. Now, just for fun, I'm gonna take those out. If I press F4 a few times, the dollar signs go away. I think I have to press it 3 times. Okay? Now it's a relative reference, now it's an absolute reference, and then it's a mixture. Okay? I'm going to pretend I forgot to do that so that you can see what happens when I copy this formula. Then you need to press a comma, and then it says, oh, which one do you want? We want the first quartile, which is the first, so I'm going to put the number 1 there, right? The first quartile, the 25th percentile. Okay? Now, I'm going to press enter. So look, it got 31 instead of 30. Okay? Now that's okay. The computer does it with a different method than you, but that's okay. Yes?
So the quartile that you clicked on, did it exclude the again?
Now, okay, so the one I did just plain old quartile. If I had done quartile exclude F4, comma 1, okay. Oh, it gave me 29. Really? I didn't expect that. Quartile include. I think that'll give me 31 again. Okay, so the computer has different ways to do it. I'm trying to make it easier for you, okay? So here's the rule for the class. As you can see, you're going to get different values depending on which command you use, okay? Here's what I'd like you to remember, okay? If you're doing a paper test, do it the first way I showed you. In this case, that gave me a 30, okay? If you're using the computer, just use the plain old quartile command, okay? Don't use the other ones. This is the command I want you to use, equals quartile, okay? Now, here's the thing that I want to do. You may want to say, I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to press Control-C to copy. I'm going to press Control-V to paste. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to edit this. Instead of the 1 there, I want to put a 3 there. But notice something over here. If you just think you're changing it to 3, notice that it ignores the first 2 values, and it includes your mean, which we did not want it to include. Okay? So you can actually go in here, if you highlight your A3 to A17 here, you can change this and say, no, that's not what I wanted this. Okay? Now notice I got a different value there as well. Now, let me just show you, if I use the quartile, I guess it doesn't matter which one I use because they're going to be different. I'll use this one just to keep it different. So if I had pressed F4 now and then comma 1, okay. Oh, that one excluded it. That's funny. Why did it give me different values before? Let's use the include one. It gave different values before, didn't it? That's weird. All right. Now, anyway, at any rate, we'll copy this, and I'm going to paste it. Now, when I change this 1 to a 3, notice, because I pressed F4, my range is correct. My array is correct. Okay? So you may want to put that F4 in there if you're going to copy that quartile command, and then you won't have to rechange your array. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Yes.
How did you do the keyframe when you copied it and then you changed?
So I copied this formula here, and then I pasted it here, and then I changed that 1 to a 3 because I want the 3rd quartile. Okay. Does that make sense?
I got this.
You must have different data set then. Making sure you've got everything the exact same as I do. If you got a different value,
I have 31 for key.
you'll have to check. You might have a typo in your data. Okay. All right. Now, the last thing that I just wanted to mention here. Okay. Let's go back to the formula for just a second. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. So as we look back here. Oh, well, one more thing. Okay, so what % of data should be between the minimum and Q1? you would expect 25% here. Between Q1 and the median, what would you expect? 25. Between the median and Q3, what would you expect? 25. And between the Q3 and the maximum, what would you expect? You'd also expect 25%, right? Now, what percent of data is in the interquartile range? You would expect 50%, right? Okay. And so so you probably were wondering, back when we were talking about these formulas here, where did that 1.5 come from? Okay. Well, if you took a Q3, you would expect 25% of your data to be beyond that. Well, I'm going to double that, okay? And I'm going to say I want to add 50%, okay? So you can think of this as 150% of your interquartile range. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my Q3 plus 150% of my interquartile range. And if there's a value beyond that, like Michael Jordan, that's an outlier, okay? So basically, you can think of this, because there should be 50% here. There should only be 25% here. But if I double that and go 50%, if there's a number beyond 50%, 150% of that number, it's an outlier. And so that's where it comes from. And it works the same way on the low side. If I go 150% of the IQR and I subtract it from Q1, every value is going to be lower than that. So let's go back to here and I hate this thing. So let's figure out what are our fences. Our lower, well, first of all, we need to figure out IQR, right? Our IQR is, who haven't I picked on? I don't have it. Well, I kind of picked on Olivia. What's your name on the end?
Robert.
Robert. What's the interquartile range? And let's do it. We'll do it for both the manual and the computer. Okay.
So it would be
What'd you say?
8.
38 minus
Q1.
30. Okay. So on the manual method, it's 8, and I could copy this formula over here, and on the computer method, it's 5.5. Okay? Then we can do with the lower fence and the upper fence. Do you remember what the value is for the lower fence? The lower fence is Q1, right? So Q1 is 30 minus 1.5 times your interquartile range, the 8 there, okay? So my lower fence is 18. Do I have any values lower than 18? Okay, so that says no outliers. Now, if I do the same thing here, I'm just going to copy and paste this. Do I have any values lower than 22.75? No. Okay. With the upper, let's pick on, tell me your name. Chantry. Find the upper fence for me.
Q3 plus 1.5 times.
Q3 plus 1.5 times 8. Do I have any values greater than 50? No. And if I use the other method, it's going to be 44%, 44.75. Do I have any values greater than 44.75? No, but Mo was close, right? He was nervous I was going to pick on him. That's why his heart rate went up. Okay. We've got no outliers in either case. Okay. Now, so could you, let's see, we'll do this on the computer since we got a few minutes here. Now, the next thing that I want to do here is I want to take, so let's say that I want, here, let me insert a row here. Let's say this is pulse rate. Okay. Now, if I wanted to create a histogram, it's going to work now because I've got more than 5 data points. Okay. If you go to insert, and if you go to recommended charts, and if you go to all charts, And if you go to box and whisker, now it works, okay? Now the thing I don't like about this is I don't like that one there. I wonder if I can type over that. This is going to be, well, here. Actually, let's do this. We're going to insert our axis titles. I really don't like that. So this is going to be, the title of the class is going to be Math 1040 class. What should I put here for my axis title? Pulse rate. Spell it right, hopefully. Oops. And over here, this is going to be what? That's class or something. Okay. Now, could you, so one of the interesting things that it does here, it puts, what do you think that X represents? It actually represents the mean. The median is the line, but it's one of the cool things. It puts the mean on there. Now, if you were drawing this by hand, in fact, and I don't care whether it's vertical or horizontal, let's draw this by hand, okay? I'm going to keep my data there so I can look at it. Okay? But if I were drawing this by hand, okay, and whether you draw it vertically or horizontally, I don't care. So it goes from what? 28 to 43. So here's what I would do. Okay, this is going to be the manual method, but I will compare it with the computer. Okay, with the manual method, I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to do. Well, we're going to do it a few different ways. Okay, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Okay? So in this case, I've got my minimum is 28, so I'm going to put my minimum here. My Q1 is 30. My median is 34. My Q3 is 38. I'm going to complete the box, and I'll make that a little whisker. And my maximum is 43. Okay? Now, if I'm doing this on the computer, and if I'm using the same, I'm going to use the computer values. Okay? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 40, 30. That's good. Okay, so if I'm using the computer values, I'm still using the 28. Okay, so that hasn't changed. This time I'm using 31. This time I'm using 34. This time I'm using 36.5, so this is going to be a little bit smaller. 36.5 is probably right there. And 43. That won't change. So the computer values are going to have a longer whisker and a shorter interquartile range than this. Now, what I haven't done, let's pretend for a moment that Mo had a pulse of 53. Okay? Now you'll notice here, as we look here, as I change this on the computer, it puts in 53 is now an outlier. It puts a little dot right there. Okay? Now, if you're doing this by hand, okay, here's how I want you to do this. Okay? Now, because we've got 53 is now an outlier, you can put a little dot there. However, I don't want your whisker is only going to go to, I'm going to use the fence now. So if I'm using the manual method, this is now goes to 50. Okay? If I'm using the computer method, it's 44.75, so it's a little bit longer. And then I've got a 53 out here. Okay? So on the low side, I have no outliers. So I'm still going to use the minimum here. But since I have an outlier here on the high side, I put the 53. So 53 represents the outlier. And then I'm going to use the value of the fence for the value of my whisker. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if you go on the internet, they're going to have different methods. This is the method I want you to use. Some other methods, just so you know, instead of using, they would go to 39. Here, I'll stop it at 39. Some methods stop your whisker where I put that green mark there. Okay? But I want you to just use my method here. Just make your whisker as long as this is the fence. This is the fence. Okay? All right. Now, so I did not cover standard deviation. So we're up to, so I think we did 2.1 through 2.6. Standard deviation is going to be fun. We're going to do that by hand. You're welcome to read ahead, but we'll talk about that next time. So your homework for chapter 2 and your quiz is going to be 2.1 through 2.6. Okay? And then we'll cover standard deviation next time. You'll be glad I didn't jam that in today, because this is going to be we're going to start doing some real math now. Okay? All right. So see you all tomorrow.